We are still awaiting word on what's going on with Tage Thompson. So while we wait, let's take an opportunity to evaluate how good he really has been this year, how they could replace him. I've got some lines for you on that, and also a little social media debate that I want to get in on Tage and the Four Nations tournament that's coming up in the spring. All ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making the Locked On Sabres podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with some big returns on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Stinky Joe DiBiase coming to you on an off day for the Sabres. So we do not have a game tonight. They will play on Thursday next against the St. Louis Blues. So we got a couple of days in between to get into some big picture stuff. So that's coming up here on today's episode. So stay tuned for that. And we've got some text to go through as well. I want to talk a lot about Tage Thompson today as we do not have an update. I'm kind of surprised by that. So me and Jeremy White on WGR, we talked with Lindy Ruff on Tuesday morning, as we always do. And Lindy's very forthcoming about injuries. Like, he even told us today the injury that Benson was dealing with early on in the season was an ankle injury. Which, I mean, for hockey, whoa, you never get any specifics. Even after it's happened, you never get it. So that we found out about Benson, but nothing on Tage. There was more to be done, I guess, evaluating his injury. Let me just say this. Every minute that passes that we don't hear about Tage Thompson, in my opinion, is good news. Until they practice. Then Lindy speaks, and then who knows? What you see in hockey sometimes, and you see in sports, is if a guy's injury is really bad, you're not going to hear it from the coach at a scrum at practice. You're going to hear the team announce it. You know, you're going to see a public release, a press release. You're going to see a tweet in the middle of the day when nobody else is at the building. You're going to see a news drop somewhere along the way. This actually happened earlier this week with Anthony Mantha in Calgary. Mantha has a torn ACL, and he's out for the year. So we found out through a tweet in the middle of the day from Calgary, a press release from Calgary, that was the case. So every minute we don't get that press release on Tage is a good thing. It's a lower body injury. That's all we know. The best I could do for you is we're going to have to wait to hear from Lindy tomorrow. And maybe we'll have more of an update then. Even if it's hey, he's day to day or he's week to week. I don't want to say it would take week to week, but week to week is better than anything that could be worse. There's a lot to get to on this with Tage. But as I said on our last show, kind of the theme of today's show is they just simply can't afford to be missing Tage Thompson. So we'll get to a lot of that. If you want to check out our text club, if you want to be the first to find out about Tage's injury, become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club. To sign up, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place to do that. And then from there on, you're just texting with us back and forth. We were tossing around some different ideas for how to replace Tage, or the best way to replace Tage, in the group chat. And I think there was a lot of, don't just throw Peyton Krebs up on the top line and replace Tage with just whoever is next. Actually, I'll get you the exact text here from one of our texters. I'm sorry, but if they move Krebs to first line and put Obey Kubel in the fourth and call it good, I'm going to be very pissed. I don't think they're going to do that. I do not think you're just going to see Krebs move up and everything else stay the same. A lot of calls for Yuri Kulik. We'll get to that coming up in the second episode of today's show. But a lot of juggling, I think, to go on if he's out. So we'll see. Let's start, though, with today's show about where we are with Tage in general and why him being injured would be such a big deal. And it is because he has been so good. You can't overstate it. He has been so good. And I'll say it, I wasn't sure that he'd ever get back to the player that he was 2 years ago when he scored 47 goals. And remember, would have scored 50 had he not been injured at the end of that year and been playing injured at the end of that season. He would have scored 50 goals. I am very sure about that. He was a Hart Trophy guy. You know, he actually finished with, I think, a fifth place vote that year, finished 14th in the voting, so he wasn't really close by the end of the year. Middle of the year, though, he was in the discussion for the Hart Trophy. But surrounding those two that year was two 30-goal years. 38 goals the year before, 29 goals last year. If he played the 11 games he missed, probably would have got to 30. He played, remember, a lot of last year injured, though. A ton of last year injured. In fact, I would say from December on, he basically was playing injured. The back injury, maybe in particular, I always thought was the one that he was laboring from the most because it was really affecting his skating and how strong he was on the puck, the movement in general. So Thompson, who's been in the league since, I mean, we know his career. 2017 is when he first plays in the league for St. Louis, 41 games that season. And it takes him 4 years to get going. But then he does. And since Tage has become a real NHL player, I've got two 30-plus goal seasons. I've got a 47-goal season. I've got 1 year of him playing like an elite number one center, and I've got 2 years of him being a fringe number one, more like a really good number two center. This year, he answered the call. He is back to playing at the elite number one center level. He is on a 50-plus goal pace. This year, yesterday, when he scored against Montreal, you might have seen the tweet. You might have seen the Sabres even pointed out in the arena. Thompson came into a tie for the NHL league lead in goals. That happened. Sitting here right now, Tage Thompson is 1 goal back. Cole Caulfield actually scored later on in that game. Caulfield actually has the most goals, 12 goals and 1 assist. That's Caulfield's stat line, by the way. 12 goals, 1 assist. Tage, 11 goals and 7 assists. He is tied for second with Nikita Kucherov, Sam Reinhart, and William Nylander. 1 above Ovechkin, 1 above Panarin, 1 above Draisaitl, Nico Hischier. Some good players at the top that Thompson is right up there with. Not only that, that includes power play. Tage has not been scoring in the power play as much, but what that does mean is, not scoring in the power play as much. He's 1 power play goal. Thompson leads the NHL in even strength goals. 5-on-5 goals right now. He's the most, 10. Second, Connor McMichael with 9, of all people. Behind him, Lafreniere with 8, Roslovic with 8, Roslovic with 8. Thompson has 10. He is the most in the National Hockey League to start the season at 5-on-5. He is scoring skilled goals. Yesterday, he is driving to the net, stick handling around a defenseman, cutting out in front and scoring. He is scoring one-timer goals like he scored the other night against Calgary, where he blasts off a wicked slap shot, 93 miles per hour on that one. He had a 104-mile-an-hour slap shot earlier in the year. All the skills are on display right now. Thompson is a number one center. And his play so far this year, to me, is more confirmation that you can rely on him to be a number one center. And I even talked about this offseason. I'm not so sure. I am not sure. Because the Sabres, if there's one thing they've been lacking, is superstar players since Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart left the team or were traded away. And Thompson has answered the bell. And I do think, after watching him through 16 games this year, Thompson is that player. I just think he is that player if he's healthy. And that, again, is another question mark right now. It was a question last year. Actually, it wasn't even a question last year. We knew last year he was hurt. We knew the year before at the end that he was hurt. And right now, we don't know the extent of his injuries. So, some of the advanced numbers on Thompson before we get to some line combinations. If you're watching along on our YouTube channel, if you're not, by the way, you can watch our show on YouTube whenever you'd like. We always post our shows in video format, so that's available to you. I'm gonna share his Evolving Wild stats, his page at Evolving Wild on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out. So far this year, Tage Thompson is playing like the number one center that we come to know 2 years ago. And his advanced numbers back that up by like leaps and bounds. So far this year, his expected goals above replacement, it's one of the good measuring tools for offense that they have at Evolving Wild. He's in the 98th percentile. In fact, if you look at, actually, no, sorry, he's not in the 98th percentile. He's in the 98th percentile for overall offense because goals above replacement, he's not number one. Expected goals above replacement, good number to evaluate offense at Evolving Wild. Tage Thompson's number one in the NHL, right above Leon Draisaitl, who is number two. That's where he's at. Expected WAR, another one of these advanced stats, number one in the National Hockey League. He's playing like one of the top 5 players in the league so far this year. Expected offense, expected EVO, another one of these. He's at 10. And what does that number mean to you? Here's a good context for it. Second is Leon Draisaitl, 8.9. Third in the league is Alex Lafreniere at 6.8. He's number one, and he's number one by a good margin. He has arguably been the best offensive player in the league, I think, so far this season. And defensively, we talked about this a little bit last year. Defensively, Tage has gotten better. This year, he's in the 80th percentile at Evolving Wild for his for Evolving Hockey for his defense. So Thompson has played, I think, at a Hart Trophy level. I don't think he would be in that conversation unless you get the team success along with it. But Thompson has been unreal to start this season, and they are going to miss him dearly if he's out. So now let's get to that question. If Thompson is out, how on earth are they going to best replace him? I've got some lines, and I got one hot take, I think, on the line combinations that I've put together if Tage is out. We'll get to that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is brought to you by SelectQuote. The Stanley Cup, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone or in the net. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers, nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. You invest so much time in taking care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of you. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You could get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. Head to SelectQuote.com. Licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast in between games here. Sabres lose to Montreal 7-5 on Monday. We'll see what they got against St. Louis on Thursday. We'll see if Tage Thompson plays. Now, if Tage Thompson does not play on Thursday, and I would even say going forward, I think the Sabres might have to get a little bit creative with how to produce offense because so much of their offense right now revolves around Tage Thompson. Thompson, with 11 goals on the year, you're not going to find another player in the league that is scoring a higher percentage of his team's goals than you're going to find with Thompson. The Sabres this season have scored 55 goals. He has 11 of them. And at even strength, it's 47 goals on the year, and he has 10. So it's even a higher percentage in that department. So how are they going to replace him? Not easily. And honestly, before I even get to the lines, if Tage is out, the Sabres probably have to play a different style of hockey. Honestly, I just don't. I already had this concern about them. And I do feel like outside of Tage and outside that top line, it still is true. They're not a very dangerous team offensively. They don't have a lot of goal-scoring talent on their roster. Now that you take Tage out, you have a team that's been playing, I think, a very balanced style. I think the Sabres as a team under Lindy Ruff are buttoned up in their own end, and they try to let their players play aggressive at the same time. They don't want to completely play, Barry Trotz, lock it in, all block shots, Islanders hockey. I think they want to be able to play that sometimes, but I do think if you watch them, you see defensemen jumping in. Hey, I mentioned the first goal Montreal scored on Monday. How does that goal happen against them? Because the Sabres had two defensemen, Jacob Bryson and Owen Power, jumping up in the play and two forwards back to cover for them. That's a team that's willing to take chances offensively, even if not as many chances as they used to under Don Granato. I think if Tage is out, they need to lock it down. I think they might have to go all the way down. They might have to play Islander hockey. They might have to play, the trap Devils teams from the early 2000s type of hockey. I think they might have to go lean into that style. And I personally don't know how they're going to do with that. I think they have a couple of lines that will do great with that. The McLeod line, for instance. I wonder what they would look like as an overall team playing that style. But I don't know if they're going to have a choice. I think without Tage, they're going to have to play games to win 2-1. Unless somebody starts surprising us all offensively. And maybe that happens. Maybe Cousins gets going. That is how I think you need to build the lines to start. You need to give Dylan Cousins every opportunity to surprise us. And he's given us no reason on the ice, in my opinion, to make us think this is coming. But they need him. They need him to surprise everybody. They need him to show up and be 30-goal Cousins from 2 years ago. I'm not betting on that. I'm not counting on that, but they really do need it. So that's where I'm going to start with my lines that I built with Tage out of the lineup, should he be out. And it starts with that mentality. I need to get the most out of Dylan Cousins. So I've got Dylan Cousins just replacing Tage on line one. And I'm not, what Lindy did against Montreal was he put the kid line back together, the Legion of Zoom, if you will, which I don't think you're allowed to call anymore because, doesn't look like Jack Quinn knows how to skate anymore. But Dylan Cousins between JJ Peterka and Alex Tuch. That's what I would do. I would put Cousins between the best two wingers you have, and that's, to me, Tuch and Peterka, to give Cousins the most opportunity possible to get going offensively. I think him playing with Quinn, I think Quinn is helping drag Cousins down right now offensively. And I think by putting Tuch on that line instead of Quinn, you're giving him more scoring chances, less responsibility defensively to have to focus on, more puck possession in the offensive zone. You're getting more speed on his line, someone that can keep up with him. Quinn is not able to do that right now. I think you got a fast and skilled line with Cousins, Tuch, and Peterka. I don't know how that will go with Cousins, but I think if he's not going to score with those two, he's not going to score with anybody. That's line one. Line two, although I will say I bet this line would play fewer minutes than line three, but I'm going to call it line two anyway because I'm trying to find offense. And this is where I think you might qualify as a hot take. I'm taking Jack Quinn out of the lineup. And here's why. I think right now, with Tage being out, they need to exhaust all avenues to get as much offense as possible from individuals. And after watching the last 16 games, I am not confident at all that Jack Quinn is their best option for a top six winger to score goals on this hockey team right now. So, and that even was compounded on Monday, the way he looked on Monday, missing opportunities, missing the net, falling down. I think Quinn's got to be out of the lineup because they need offense. Because they need offense. That's why I would take Quinn out of the lineup. And I would put Yuri Kulik in there. I think Yuri Kulik right now, anyone disagree with me on that? I think right now Yuri Kulik is a more dangerous hockey player than Jack Quinn. So you tell me about their age, tell me about their ages, tell me about development, tell me about the plan, tell me about where to put them. Tell me about how, getting Quinn to Rochester isn't possible. Tell me about all that. I'm making this decision, if I'm Lindy Ruff, based on I need to produce offense without Tage Thompson. Who right now gives me the best chance to score goals in my top six? Kulik or Quinn? And I think the answer is Yuri Kulik, personally. So I would put Yuri Kulik on the second line. I would have Krebs at center. On line 2, I've liked Krebs more than I thought I would at the start of this year. He scores on Monday. He's produced some chances. He is not doing great when it comes to passing. We saw that mistake that he made against Montreal, but I would put Krebs up there in line 2 with Kulik, and then Benson. Benson's been really good, so I would keep Benson in the top 6. It's a young line. It's a kid line. It's kind of a small line, and this is where I would say that's my second scoring line, but it also might be third when it comes to ice time. I am not touching McLeod, Greenway, and Zucker. That line, if in my opinion, stays together no matter what. That line is cooking. That line plays great together. They all mesh well. You've got 2 incredibly fast players, especially McLeod, but Zucker's fast in his own right. You've got Zucker, who's a good finisher and is impressive offensively. McLeod, who's an elite defensive center, the way he's playing right now. And they have your big bulldozer type in Jordan Greenway, who could do a little bit of everything. That line you're not touching. You could be tempted to put McLeod up on a second line with Benson and start juggling things around there, because I do think on merit, McLeod is your number 2 center right now. I just don't want to touch that line. I want to keep the line together with Zucker and Greenway. You want to give McLeod's line the second most ice time and call it line 2? Fine. But I'm not touching those 3. And then line 4, Lafferty back at center with Obe, Kubel, and Malenstein. It would have Obe, Kubel re-entering the lineup. So that's what I would have. The biggest takeaways from my lines would be Quinn out of the lineup, which I don't expect to happen, but it's what I would do. And I would have Kulik up on line 2 with Krebs, and I would have Cousins. I would not put Cousins, Quinn, and Peterka together. I would put Cousins with Peterka and Tuck, personally. That's what I would do. Let me know what you think. You got lines for me? Text them in. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to sign up for our text club. When we come back, one more thing on this Tage conversation. There was some takery going on in the social media department this week when it comes to Thompson and the 4 Nations tournament that's coming up in the spring. Team USA and Tage Thompson. I got some thoughts on that when we return here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the rest of the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you are placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Today's episode also brought to you by PrizePicks, the best place to get real money sports action. Over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks invented the flex play. It means you could still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You could double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Puts their members first at PrizePicks. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Sneaky Joe DiBiase. So the 4 Nations tournament is coming up in the spring. I've talked about it. I'm very excited about it. I love international hockey, best on best international hockey. And to me, it is one of the worst things Gary Bettman has ever done. In fact, I think it probably is the worst thing. No, they did lose full seasons. It's one of the worst things Gary Bettman has ever done, which is the elimination of best on best international hockey in the last decade. It's disgusting that Gary Bettman, in my opinion, has allowed that to happen, even actively chosen to have that happen. This year, though, we got the 4 Nations tournament. So we got USA, Canada, Sweden, Finland. And Team USA is going to be interesting. One thing about Team USA, to set this up, that has drove me nuts in the past. The last time they had the best on best hockey was the World Cup of Hockey in 2016 that happened before the year. And that team And U.S. teams before have often passed on good talent, great talented players for lesser, more physical two-way players. The one that sticks out the most was in 2016. This is just one example. There are a dozen of these. There might be more than that. But because it's been, this was the last tournament, the last one that comes to mind was Phil Kessel, Brandon Dubinsky. Phil Kessel in 2016 had 70 points. And then actually after that, 34 goals and 92 points. So Phil Kessel is, at that point in time, 29 years old. He is in the middle of his prime. And he's a great player. Great player. So he gets left off that American team. And who went on it over him? Brandon Dubinsky, who was kind of nearing the end of his career. He was coming off a 41-point campaign where he, 30, what was the last year? 2015-16. So 48 points, 17 goals. The year before that, 13 goals. But why was he on the team? Because he was seen as this Sidney Crosby killer. This Sidney Crosby guy that's always going to play real well, tough nose against Crosby. And then they showed up and he was horrible against Crosby because what? Crosby's like, what? You're throwing Brandon Dubinsky at me? It'd be a tougher challenge if you threw out, whoever would have been the better center offensively because they can have the puck more often. The Team USA hockey for so long. I'm so ready to be mad about this again. Because, and maybe Greg Wyshynski always makes this point a lot. A lot of these decisions might get made because 1980 happened. That the miracle on ice happened. And the U.S. forever thought, well, we can never be the most talented team. We have to be the right team. Herb Brooks, right? I don't want the most talented guys. I want the right guys. And the U.S. has taken that to the furthest extreme imaginable at times in recent decades when they've actually played these tournaments. And are they about to do it again? And is Tage Thompson going to be the sacrificial lamb to that mentality? If he is, I'm going to lose my freaking mind. Because as we pointed out in this show earlier, Thompson and his offensive impact is as good as anybody in hockey this season. But the U.S. has a lot of other good, skilled players. This is where I think their mentality needs to be different. They can be as talented as Canada now. They've never been this close. Now they should be able to adopt a different mentality because now they actually do have the talent. Austin Matthews is going to be a center above Thompson. No gripes about that at all. Jack Eichel is going to be above Tage Thompson in the center depth chart. No gripes about that at all. I would have a problem with anybody else being named over Tage Thompson. So the discussion on social media that sparked this for me was John Buchagros yesterday, saying that he would go Matthews, Eichel, Thompson, Larkin. Those would be the four in that order. Thompson would be his third line center. And he would want to see, he actually had lines. He put Matthew Boldy and Jake Gensel with Tage Thompson. And Michael Russo, this is what really scares me. Michael Russo, who is one of the most plugged-in insiders in the league. He covers the Minnesota Wild, though. This is what I'm terrified, man. I'm so terrified. Michael Russo is one of the most plugged-in insiders in the league, and he covers the Minnesota Wild. The general manager of the U.S. hockey team for the Four Nations tournament is Bill Guerin, who is also the general manager of the Minnesota Wild. And Russo tweeted in response to Bucci, Trocheck and Nelson, I bet, over Tage. That terrifies me. Russo's plugged in, and he's plugged into Bill Guerin. And he's telling you right now, I'd bet Trocheck and Nelson. Brock Nelson over Tage Thompson. Brock Nelson making the team over Tage would be the most USA hockey thing ever. Brock Nelson is 33 years old. He's a good player. He is. He's got 6 goals this year. Brock Nelson is not a better hockey player than Tage Thompson. To me, and this is a guy that scored 30 goals 3 years in a row. He's not a bad player. He's a very good player. I can't fathom him making the team over Tage. If Tage continues to play like this. If Tage is hurt, if Tage struggles, then I get it. It'd be nuts to me. So that's a little update on the Four Nations. And Tage might have a dogfight on his hands to make USA Hockey. And I might lose my mind along the way. All right. Well, we hope for the best on Thompson, his health, and him to be back, hopefully Thursday, but maybe a little bit later. I would take right now him being ready for the road trip, but we'll see where we're at, hopefully tomorrow. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Appreciate everybody checking us out. If you want to check out our text club, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres to do that. Your next listen, if you're looking for some fantasy hockey tips, Steele and Flip got you covered with Locked On Fantasy Hockey and Bills Talk as they get ready for Chiefs week. Joe Marino over on the Locked On Bills podcast has got you covered there. Thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.